This is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by West Virginia University, offering education, healthcare, and the opportunity to achieve career success since 1867. Information at wvu.edu. Embassy Suites by Hilton Charleston, an all-suite hotel and conference center minutes from Yeager Airport and Capital Markets. Reservations and brasserie dining information available at hilton.com.
Solar Holler, supporting Appalachian communities and building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar energy and battery backup to homeowners, nonprofits, and businesses throughout the region. More at solarholler.com.
Welcome to the Legislature Today. I'm Curtis Tate. It was a somber day in the Senate as lawmakers passed a bill that would change the state's penalties for drug trafficking offenses. The bill is named in honor of a West Virginia woman who lost her life to fentanyl. It passed with her parents present in the gallery. Health reporter Emily Rice brings us that story.
Senate Bill 196, now called Lauren's Law, increases the penalties for drug trafficking in West Virginia to keep manufacturers from trying to distribute their supply in the state. The lead sponsor of the bill, Senator Mike Deeds, a Republican from Greenbrier County, said in his floor speech that the bill is designed to prevent crime and save lives. Lauren's father, Michael Cole, said his daughter earned her degree in social work from WVU to help people suffering from substance use disorder. After her death, her family opened a treatment facility in her honor called Lauren's Wish. He supports the increased penalties, saying the state needs to take a stand.
We can't actually stop or have an impact on the flow of drugs into the United States, but what we can do is educate, choke out the demand, and make it so that they don't want to be here to sell. And to do that, you have to have stricter or harsher penalties. There has to be severe consequences for their actions. They know exactly what they're doing. They're targeting the United States. It's a deliberate attack on our youth. It's a #1 killer.
Senator Brian Helton, a Republican from Fayette County and co-sponsor of the bill, said Lauren's parents' commitment to honoring her legacy in combating the opioid epidemic made lawmakers decide to name the bill in her honor.
We came up with a bill, and we had met Michael and Sherry Cole at their Lauren's Wish Center that was created on behalf of Lauren. And after that meeting, we decided as a group that, you know what, we needed to memorialize her life because she touched so many lives. And we need to reach out to all West Virginians to let them know what kind of people are behind this.
The bill would change the state's penalties to up to 40 years in prison for trafficking the same amount of drugs that earned the offenders who sold Laura drugs laced with fentanyl in July 2020, 15 years in prison under current law. Anyone found guilty of transporting a controlled substance into the state would also face stricter penalties if this law is enacted, up to 30 years for more than 5 grams of fentanyl. The bill faced opposition from Senator Joey Garcia, a Democrat from Marion County, who acknowledged the importance of tackling the opioid epidemic, but criticized the bill's methodology on the Senate floor. Garcia said he grew concerned after hearing from Kenny Matthews in the Senate's Judiciary Committee. Garcia said Matthews, who is in recovery, would still be incarcerated today if the bill becomes law.
Raising criminal penalties every single session with the idea that there's going to be this deterrence, and that deterrence is not getting over with people. These things don't deter people. I think potentially the amounts can, and I think that was well put in this legislation. But when it comes to this basic idea here that people are just going to be in prison longer, sometimes that's when the light turns on and they can actually be a good tax-paying citizen.
Garcia also said the bill limits judges' ability to use their discretion when sentencing by mandating a certain amount of jail time instead of having the option to send a defendant to a recovery program or home incarceration.
A lot of people who are caught under the first criminal penalties that are raised with intent to deliver, not all those people are pushing huge amounts of drugs onto this state. In fact, some of those people have a problem. Some of those people are in the midst of substance use disorder. And in many cases, the judicial system that we have, Mr. President, provides for a number of different individualized options, and the penalties right now, I think, are absolutely sufficient.
The bill passed with Senator Garcia the only lawmaker to vote against it. For the Legislature Today, I'm Emily Rice in Charleston.
The House of Delegates passed several bills today, many of which, like the statewide camping ban, garnered debate. Brianna Heaney has more.
The House of Delegates passed a statewide camping ban bill. The bill is targeted at homeless encampments throughout the state. A Supreme Court decision allowed certain types of bans on homeless encampments. Since then, municipalities around the state have issued camping bans on public property. Now, the legislature is considering a statewide camping ban. The bill's lead sponsor is Gino Chiarelli, a Republican from Monongalia County. Part of his district is Morgantown, where last year residents successfully petitioned to suspend a camping ban from the city council until a vote next month. He says he took into account that some of his district would not be included in the Morgantown vote.
It's definitely something that I took into account, but ultimately at the end of the day, when it comes to a lot of the legislation that we pass out of here, there's people that are for and there's people that are against. The people that are for it, a lot of them live in my district, and they unfortunately don't have a say when it comes to the local ordinance. So
the bill would place the ban over the entire state, including areas like the southern coalfields, where resources are scant and there's only one homeless shelter in the entire region.
Into play. This is one piece that may help us in one area, and I'm of course open to discussions and legislations that are going to help us move get the ball rolling in all areas of the state. So it's not a one-size-fits-all type of approach.
Yeah, but it does fit. It does go statewide.
It does, yes.
Yeah, right. So that's like kind of where it's hard to connect those two ideas, that it is essentially a one-size-fits-all approach to the state as it is now.
Right. Well, it's something that my people need in my area, and instead of waiting for our municipality for the vote results, I have to be down here advocating for the things that my people believe in.
On a statewide level?
Yeah.
Okay. Chiarelli pointed to other pieces of legislation that would have been introduced, like a bill that would take a comprehensive approach to solving homelessness in the state. However, that bill has not yet been taken up in any committee. The deadline for bills to be taken up in committee is effectively March 28th. Delegate Evan Hansen, a Democrat, also from Monongalia County, voted no on the bill. His district encompasses half of Morgantown.
And I don't think it's up to these people here in Charleston to tell the city of Morgantown or any other city what to do.
He says if the bill is passed, he's concerned about areas that don't have resources for people experiencing homelessness.
There's a big concern about areas that don't have resources because this bill doesn't address those areas. It also doesn't address areas like Morgantown, where we have lots of resources, but they're frequently full.
The bill doesn't necessarily ban sleeping on public property. Instead, it bans camp paraphernalia. Those are things like tents, blankets, and sleeping bags. Chiarelli says this also applies to storing personal belongings on public property, like a backpack or pillow.
If you are camping illicitly or you are storing personal property on state or municipal property, you would not be able to do that. And then the enforcing officer, first warning, someone would get a verbal warning. They would be given resources outlining any available alternative shelters.
Then there is a progressive punitive scale. The second offense would result in a fine between $25 and $100. The third offense would be a fine of up to $500 or jail for up to 30 days. The bill now heads over to the Senate for consideration. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Brianna Heaney in Charleston.
Student conduct and discipline has been a focus of legislative activity for the past several years. As Chris Schultz reports, one subcommittee is looking at bills to help students focus and behave.
House Bill 2003 would limit the use of cell phones and other devices in classrooms. It is one of the bills introduced this year by House Speaker Roger Hanshaw on behalf of Governor Patrick Morrisey. Katie Franklin, Deputy General Counsel to the Governor, told the House Subcommittee on Public Education Monday evening that under the bill, cell phones and other devices like headphones or earbuds cannot be seen, heard, or in use while school is in session.
It also empowers teachers to take control of their classrooms and to once again become the object of their students' attention. This bill allows both teachers and children to focus on class instead of fighting against the never-ending diversions of modern life.
Across the country, close to a dozen states have either implemented or considered implementing legislation to restrict phone usage in schools. That includes neighboring states Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Virginia, who have all taken steps to restrict phone usage in schools in the past year. At least 3 West Virginia counties implemented device restrictions for the current academic year. Delegate Jeffrey Stevens, a Republican from Marshall County, asked about a district's ability to go further than what is outlined in the bill.
Would schools be able to have stricter rules than what are provided in the bill?
I believe so. The point of having the legislative rules and the additional policies is to allow for them to do that. This should be seen as a floor for schools and not as a ceiling.
House Education Chair Delegate Joe Ellington, a Republican from Mercer County, pointed out that the West Virginia Board of Education already promulgated their own policy to limit the use of personal electronic devices in schools, which is open to public comment until March 20th.
This bill goes a little further in what that looks like and how that works, again, to create a little more of a foundation and to give it further weight of a codified statute.
House Bill 2003 does allow for exceptions to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act or with the West Virginia Human Rights Act. And Tuesday afternoon, the subcommittee voted to advance the bill to the House Education Committee. Another bill relating to student conduct on school grounds, House Bill 3099, would authorize law enforcement to issue citations to students caught using nicotine or tobacco products on school property or during school activities. Delegate Joe Statler, a Republican from Monongalia County and the bill's sponsor, said Monday one of the counties he represents had specifically requested an enforcement mechanism for existing rules.
They clearly state that they have a policy in place that to work with these issues, but they feel that vaping is up in the schools and that they need this piece of legislation in order, if they have to go to that route, that they would be able to give a citation to those students after multiple times of trying to work with them to get them to basically not use, which are not allowed to in the school.
The Public Education Subcommittee voted Tuesday to advance the bill to the House Education Committee. For the Legislature Today, I'm Chris Schultz.
Yesterday, Maria Young turned to the issue of legislation related to foster care and adoption as multiple bills wind their way through the 2 chambers. Maria spoke with Jaycie Bias, Executive Director of the West Virginia Foster, Adoptive, and Kinship Parents Network, and Rachel Kinder of Mission, West Virginia, a nonprofit that advocates and focuses on the same areas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today here in the very, very busy and crowded Capitol Rotunda building. I am joined today by Jaycie Bias with the West Virginia Foster, Adoptive, and Kinship Parents Network, which is a huge mouthful.
Yes.
But a lot of folks behind that, and a statewide organization that serves a lot of people in this arena. And also by Rachel Kinder with Mission, West Virginia. And we talked about this earlier, kind of the same thing, foster, kinship, and adoptive families that you serve as a nonprofit.
Correct.
So ladies, I'm going to ask both of you, Jaycie, let's start with you. What are the pieces of legislation that are moving this legislative session that are most concerning or most interesting to you?
Yeah, so one thing that's really interesting to me is that we have, it feels like a lot of foster care bills in general, in both the Senate and the House. I'm really happy to see that they are trying to fix some things that need some fixing. And so one of the things that I particularly like, but wish had some more movement, let's say, and maybe Rachel will say that, is Senate Bill 165, which is supporting kinship families financially further than the state is right now. But I do wish that was having some movement, and I do wish there was some education pieces behind that. Just as a traditional foster family would have to have CEUs, I do think that it is wise for kinship families to also have CEUs, to maybe get some trauma training, and of course the standard CPR, et cetera, that normal foster parents should have.
And is that partly because you find that when there are issues with a biological family that are concerns that need to be addressed, sometimes those issues stem from their own families of origin, and if those are relative placements, they might have similar issues. Is that part of the issue?
That could be a possibility. There's a lot of generational raising of children in our state, and that's part of our culture. And so I think, and because of that, it doesn't hurt to have the additional help and training to say, hey, there has been some issues here in this household, and here as a kinship family, here's what you can do to help. Here's what you can do to help these children in your care. Here's, here are some tools in your toolbox to make sure that you're taking care of these children who may need additional help with their pasts and things like that. So also some extra resource and referral for kinship families to make sure that like mental health things are being received, and any other type of services that may be necessary for a kinship family, such as more information on financial help, as well as just some clarification on funds like SNAP or WIC, just making sure that we get all of the resources into kinship families' hands as possible.
Okay. And Rachel, let me ask you the same question. What are the pieces of legislation moving through the session so far that have caught your attention, that are either a concern or something that you're hoping will go through?
Right, so like Jaycie said, I have been watching Senate Bill 165, although I'm not sure that one has moved recently. That one concerns me. I love the idea of acknowledging that we need more supports for kinship and relative families. But the idea that we would not certify those families is very scary to me. I have a program, the Kinship Navigator program, where we have 7 staff dedicated to meeting the needs of families who are caring for kids who are in state custody. These are often senior citizens on limited incomes who maybe were not prepared to be parenting suddenly very, very young children sometimes. But the certification process is there to provide training, to ensure that homes are safe, to ensure that families are physically, emotionally prepared to care for kids. And it also opens up some funding issues in that there were federal dollars we could not access if we stopped certifying our kinship relative families. So I'm all in favor of more support, but I'm also in favor of all the safety measures in place for these families. I saw this morning, and I can't remember the bill number, but there is a bill to kind of streamline the process of getting clothing vouchers for kids who are in care. I think we all know that's been huge. That's been in the news the last couple of years because Walmart is no longer a vendor, and that's pretty much the only retailer that's statewide, that's really accessible in most counties. So the retailers that will accept department vouchers are very limited and often not the best for kids. I love the fact that we're looking at a bill that would streamline that process so that there are options for someone to shop and be reimbursed, or for a caseworker to take a card and shop, or different avenues like that. Because lots of times kids come into care suddenly, they don't have adequate clothes, and what we're doing currently just has some shortcomings.
We hear a lot, and I'm going to ask both of you this question, we hear a lot about there not being enough foster families available in this state. Are there specific reasons for that, and are there pieces of legislation this session that address those needs?
So I don't care to start with this. I feel like there is an issue with the amount of foster parents because we're not focusing a lot on foster parent retention, and we're not doing that by, we're not communicating with our foster parents as we should. There's a foster parent bill of rights, and I feel like a lot of time that is undereducated to a lot of our staff of our child placing agencies as well as the Department of Human Services. And I wish that all of those rights for foster parents were articulated in every single case. So, for example, making sure that foster parents are invited to multidisciplinary meetings, or an MDT, making sure that they are privy to case information, rather than it feels like right now there's times where you talk to one worker about an issue, and then maybe you talk to their supervisor and get a completely different answer. Or maybe if there's another issue and we're talking to the West Virginia Foster Care Ombudsman, they're able to provide different information. And I actually do like that piece of legislation, and do feel like it will help retain more foster families by giving the West Virginia, I'm not sure the bill number, but it's a House bill, and it gives the Ombudsman's Office for Foster Care more access to files that, CPS are privy to, I should say. So I think that would help because we as foster parents feel like the West Virginia Foster Care Ombudsman's Office is doing a great job at advocating for us and our rights. and it's only going to be better if we get some more information in the hands of the Foster Care Ombudsman's office.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds as though some of the foster care or some of the foster families got into this with, great vision in mind of how they can help their state and help kids in need, and maybe somewhere along the line in the process, there were some things that were very frustrating. They ultimately closed their homes after going through a lot of training, a lot of investment by the state in training. And so rather than seeing those folks experience that level of frustration, not have those frustrations dealt with, you're saying, if we can provide some greater resources for foster families, then we can retain those foster families that have gone through training and add to them as we go along. Is that a fair way to paraphrase?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement. I think that, again, communication is a huge part, and this is something that I do feel like could help if we started from the top and trickled down. So from the DOHS office, talking to child placing agencies, major stakeholders like my organization or like Mission West Virginia, but also making sure that foster parents who are new starting in the system, trying to get training, are going through the proper channels of finding the correct agency for them, which is where Mission West Virginia comes into play, and make sure that the agency that folks are picking for foster care is the right fit.
Okay, Rachel, your same question.
And I would echo what Jaycie said about retention. So I'm in the foster care recruitment business. We're the only agency that is a recruitment source and a neutral information and referral source. We work with all 10 foster care agencies. Finding the right fit of an agency is huge. But we talk to about 1,200 families a year that want to be foster parents. So there's not a shortage of recruitment, but what is alarming is the turnover, the retention. So I feel like there is kind of a culture in West Virginia, and when we look at legislation, to say, let's lower the standards for who can be a foster parent. Let's lower the standards for who can be a social worker and who can have a social work license. I don't want to lower the standards. It's an incredibly hard job. I'm a foster adoptive parent. I have a master's in social work. I've been in the field 25 years, and I daily feel unprepared to parent my child. We need foster parents to have resources and adoptive parents so that when the kids are actually in your home, you have professional and coordinated resources so that your day-to-day life is easier. I don't want it easier to become a foster parent. I want it to be easier to be a foster parent.
Yes, absolutely.
You and I were talking earlier, and you mentioned a piece of legislation that would remind me, the LGBTQ foster kids. Tell me what that is and what is your concern about that?
So I think the intention is good, is that we don't want to match LGBTQ youth with families that cannot be accepting of them. But I think that needs to be looked at in the broader certification process, and I've been through a home study, Jaycie has too, and that's when you sit down with your social worker and you discuss the ins and outs, and you say, these are the ages that are right for my home, these are the genders, I can handle these behaviors or not these behaviors, my home is equipped for a child in a wheelchair. That's just part of the evaluation process for the home study, and that's the point where you could say, these types of children are fit for my home and these are not. I'm not sure that we want to overly legislate how to be a foster parent. I think we want to create an atmosphere where all types of families are welcome to be foster parents if they qualify, and then we have a good matching process of what child can be placed with which family.
All right, and I wanted to ask specifically, there were a couple of pieces of legislation. We talked earlier about House Bill 2542, which would allow CPS workers to record some of their interactions with families during removal process. What is your thought about that? Is that a good thing? I think so often it comes down to the biological family says one thing, the CPS workers say another. It's a hard thing to work with. Do you have?
I don't know that I really have a whole lot to say about that. I do feel like it's important that reunification is happening in general. Like, we should be reunifying families. That's the goal of foster care. But at the same time, we should only be reunifying families in a safe environment. So not just doing it to do it kind of thing. That's pretty much all I really feel like I need to say on that.
And then I guess the other one was House Bill 2027, which is the changing the length of time and the circumstances for when a child in foster care can be removed from that foster care placement. Do you guys have anything on that one in particular?
The only really comment I have on that is I do just want to reiterate that all of the bills that we've seen this legislative session, I want to make sure that they're always children forward. So making sure that these bills are written for the children and not written for a political agenda. That's really kind of how I am seeing a lot of these bills come to play and a lot of amendments of some of these bills. And I'm not...
Surely all of these bills are being written with the children, the best interest of the children in mind. Is that...
Yes, just making sure that when we introduce a bill, think about a child in this circumstance and how that might come into effect, but also taking into consideration how a foster family who's had this child and maybe all this child knows, how that could affect them 18 months down the road if there's a removal or a reunification. But also, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, and it is going to be difficult to write legislation on something like that, but I commend that the delegates are trying.
Thank you so much. And Rachel, I'm going to give the last couple of seconds here to you. Last wrap up, what is your greatest hope for this session in terms of these issues involving foster care and kinship and adoptive placements?
My greatest hope is that the bills that we do pass involve our stakeholders in our state, so that we're not just passing something that looks like a good idea on paper, but that the stakeholders have been consulted on this to say this can be implemented and this is realistic, and we believe that this will create positive change.
Terrific. Thank you both so much. I know you're both foster and adoptive now parents, and so I know you guys have walked the walk on this. Thank you both so much for this, and back to you.
That was Maria Young speaking with Rachel Kinder of Mission, West Virginia, and Jaycie Bias of West Virginia Foster, Adoptive, and Kinship Parents Network. That's it for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Catch the Legislature Today Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. And remember, West Virginia Public Broadcasting covers the session daily in our radio news program, West Virginia Morning, and on our news site at wvpublic.org. We also broadcast the daily floor sessions of both the House and the Senate on the West Virginia channel. I'm Curtis Tate. Good evening, and see you here again tomorrow.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by West Virginia University, offering education, healthcare, and the opportunity to achieve career success since 1867. Information at wvu.edu. Embassy Suites by Hilton Charleston, an all-suite hotel and conference center minutes from Yeager Airport and Capital Market. Reservations and brasserie dining information available at hilton.com.